In this video, I'm starting the hardcore world that I've always wanted. For this first episode, my goal is to build a cozy starter area with everything I'll need to survive. Kicking it off on day 1, we spawned in a savanna biome, so I punched an acacia tree to get some logs. Using the wood, I made a pickaxe, and then dug into the hillside to gather up some cobblestone. In the process, I found a huge coal vein, so I took the time to mine it all since it'll definitely come in handy. After that, I used the cobblestone to craft a full set of tools as well as a furnace. With some basic gear obtained, I set out to explore for more resources. I first found a cactus, and then I noticed a bunch of sugarcane along the coastline, so I gathered that up as well. I spotted a cave with some iron in it, so I went down to mine it. Just as I was gathering the last few pieces, I noticed a skeleton, so I decided not to risk it and headed back up to the surface. As I continued looking for more resources, I saw a shipwreck in the ocean, so I swam over to it to gather the loot. Unfortunately, one of the large coral sort of spawned right in the middle of it, so I was only able to find one chest. At least it did have some food in it though. The sun was already beginning to get low, so I climbed the hill in the hopes of spotting some sheep so that I could make a bed. Sadly, there were none, but I did spot a couple of cute armadillos. Before I could find any sheep, it got dark and mobs started spawning. Not wanting to risk it, I dug into a wall to wait out the night. I ate the food we found in the shipwreck, and with nothing better to do, spent some time mining a bunch of terracotta. I'm sure we'll be able to use it for some future builds, so why not gather some up? I also took the chance to smelt the iron we gathered, which I used to craft a new pickaxe, shield, and shears. Once the sun came up again, I continued our adventure and eventually found a village. It had tons of valuable resources like hay bales, a brewing stand, a bed, and even some melons. I'm probably most excited about the bed since we can finally sleep the night away now. I really want to find a place to settle down and build a starter house, so I started searching for the perfect spot. Along the way, I came across a second village where I gathered more resources before heading toward a jungle biome I had spotted. While I was there, I collected some jungle wood, bamboo, and cocoa beans. I also found a cave with some dripstone in it, so I gathered a bit so I can eventually set up a lava farm. As the search for our starter house location continued, I spotted my favorite wood types, dark oak and spruce. So I took the chance to gather saplings for both of them. My inventory is so full at this point though that I had to throw away my sword to have space for the spruce saplings. You can clearly tell where my priorities are. After searching for a bit longer, I think I finally found the perfect spot. It's a decent-sized island surrounded by a river, which feels super cozy. I also see a cherry blossom biome and a village nearby, which we can incorporate into some future projects. First things first, I made a couple of chests and unloaded all of my items. I then crafted a bunch of fences and made a small animal pen. Using wheat, I lured some cows over to it and bred them. While I was at it, I set up a second animal pen, and this one can be for sheep. Now that we have those set up, I went down to the water and tilled a bunch of grass so that I could set up a simple wheat farm. And I also planted all of my sugarcane along the edge of the water. These are the basic farms that I pretty much always set up when I first start my worlds, since I'll have an easy food source and they'll also allow me to eventually create a level 30 enchanting setup. My next goal is to get better tools and armor, so I made my way down to a nearby cave and began collecting all of the copper, coal, and iron that I could find. Once I had a decent amount of iron, I smelted it down using some furnaces and then used it to craft a full set of iron armor. Feeling a bit safer now, I made my way deeper into the mine where I eventually found a geode, so I took the chance to mine a bunch of calcite and smooth basalt as I think they could be fun to build with. After that, I continued exploring the cave, and I eventually found my first diamonds. This is always such a great feeling in a brand new world. I eventually found 2 more diamond veins, so I decided to use the shiny blue stuff to craft a pickaxe. Now that we can mine a bit faster, I gathered several stacks of both tough and deep slate as I want to use them in our starter house. While I was down here, I also took the chance to gather up a bit of diorite. At this point, my inventory was completely full, so I made my way back to the surface. Once I got there, I dropped off my items and then crafted a brand new axe and shovel using the diamonds that we got. After that, I took care of some of the chores around our base, like harvesting all of the sugarcane and wheat, and I also bred the cows and sheep again. Since I'm going to need a lot of wood for everything that I want to build, I planted a couple of dark oak and spruce trees. While I was at it, I figured I might as well plant a jungle tree as well as the bamboo that we gathered earlier. Some of the trees had already grown, so I chopped them down. I also cut down some of the oak and birch trees that were already on the island since I'll need them for our starter house. I noticed a bee's nest on one of the trees, so I placed a campfire underneath it and used shears to collect the wax. I pretty much have everything we need to build our starter house now, but there's still just a few more materials that we need to gather. First, I headed down to the edge of the water to collect sand for glass as well as clay for bricks. Next, I went down into the mine to gather up a bunch of diorite and cobblestone. I then crafted a stone cutter and used it to make all of the different deep slate blocks that I needed. After that, I chopped down all of the bamboo and crafted it into planks and slabs. While I was crafting, a wandering trader interrupted me, and since he didn't have any good trades, I took the opportunity to get 2 free leads. After that little distraction, I crafted copper grates and combined them with beeswax to prevent them from aging. I then took a quick break to breed the animals again before going on the hunt for a few cornflowers, which will be fun to decorate with. I went back into the cave once more to collect some glow lichen using shears. Finally, I crafted a few lanterns, which should be the last item we need. Before starting on the build, I took a minute to breed the cows once more and gathered all of the sugarcane along the edge of the water. That took a while, but we've now gathered every single block that we need to build our starter house. I started by laying down the foundation using a mix of deep slate blocks. To make the shape of the house more interesting, I added 2 smaller sections on either side. For the second floor, I went for a combination of diorite, calcite, and birch logs, which is one of my favorite block combinations at the moment. For the roof, I kept it simple, using both spruce and dark oak wood for a clean look. Now it's time for the little details that really give the build character. I added hay bales, lanterns, a large flower planter at the back, and even a log pile made of oak logs and extinguished campfires. And with that, the exterior of the house is finished. I'm super happy with how it came out. I'm eager to get started on the interior, but before we get to that, I took a minute to breed the cows again, as well as collect all of the sugarcane and wheat. With those chores out of the way, I made my way inside our house and began removing all of the grass blocks. With the grass blocks gone, I started placing in the floor. For one of the small rooms, I used some of the yellow terracotta that we collected during our first night. It's a little out there, but it does make our room feel super bright, which I love. For the rest of the floor, I used spruce wood and jungle wood. After that, I placed in a staircase for access to the second floor. And for the floor itself, I made use of jungle wood again. I built the ceiling for the first floor out of spruce wood, but now there's just way too much of the spruce color, so I decided to swap out the floor for oak wood instead, which helped create more contrast. I think the second floor will be the perfect area for our storage room, so I first placed in some pillars to divide up the room a bit, and then got to work fixing up the ceiling using dark oak. I then filled in the gaps in between the pillars with a bunch of chests and barrels, and it's not a whole lot of storage, but it should be more than enough for at least the early game. After that, I created a railing for the stairs using bamboo trapdoors. To fill out the center of the room, I wanted to create a large rug, so after experimenting with a few different designs, I settled on one using a pattern of amethyst and purple wool. After adding some final details like flower pots and a painting, I'm happy to call our storage room finished. I incorporated quite a few blocks that I don't normally use, but I'm really happy with the result. Now that it's done, I got rid of all of the temporary chests on the first floor and moved all of the items upstairs. I did absolutely zero organizing, but we can get to that later as I really want to finish decorating the first floor. Before I get too carried away building though, I decided to breed the cows once more, as well as harvest the sugarcane. Heading back inside our house, I got to work detailing the main room on the first floor. To add some color to the area, I created a large rug using red wool and red terracotta. I'm not going to lie, it took me like 20 minutes to design a fireplace that I was happy with, but I think the end result was totally worth it. I even managed to hide a couple of furnaces into the design so that it has some functionality. To fill out the rest of the room, I added some storage underneath the stairs and then placed in a couple of paintings on any boring sections of walls. I moved on to detailing the bedroom next. First, I made a small desk and placed a couple of flower pots on top of it. I then created a shelf higher up on the wall and filled it with additional storage. To tie the whole room together, I made a simple rug using white wool and carpet. We still have one more room to fill, and I figured it would be the perfect spot for our enchanting setup. So I bred all of the cows one more time, and then unalived all of the adult ones for their leather. With the leather, I crafted a bunch of books and then turned them into 15 bookshelves. I then placed them down inside of the room. To create the actual enchanting table, I'm going to need some obsidian, so I made my way over to a lava pool that I spotted earlier and used water to convert it into obsidian. I then spent like 10 minutes mining 30 blocks of it. It takes so painfully long with a pickaxe that has no enchantments. At least we've got plenty of extra now so that we can build another portal later on. Anyway, with all the resources in hand, I headed back home and crafted our enchanting table. I placed it in the center of the room and added some final touches like a grindstone, storage, and flower pots to decorate the area. I'll eventually add an anvil as well, but unfortunately, I don't have enough iron right now. I thought it would be a lot of fun to display a map of the island inside of our house, so I crafted some maps and took a stroll around the island to reveal them. Back at home, I put the maps up on the wall. It's going to be so rewarding watching this entire area fill up with builds. Assuming I don't die, of course. I've been procrastinating organizing the storage room for long enough, so I used the extra leather to craft a bunch of item frames and then placed them on the sides of all of the barrels. For labeling the chests, I decided to put signs on the pillars where I could write down what's inside. To make them easier to read, I dyed the signs white. It took some time and effort, but I eventually got all of my items sorted. This always feels like such a huge milestone to me since we're now set up to work on other projects. Before we do get started on other builds though, let's just take a moment to admire the fully finished interior. I'm super happy with how it came out. To celebrate finishing the interior of our starter house, let's take a moment to check in on my cats. If you're new here, this is my totally shameless attempt to guilt trip you into liking the video. Jokes aside, it really helps support the channel, so I genuinely appreciate you taking a moment to do it. After all the building we've been doing, I have 0 coal left and only like 3 diamonds, so I got to work putting together a mine entrance where we can eventually mine a bunch of useful resources. I went with a pretty simple design using spruce wood, but I think it fits the area nicely. Of course, we still need to dig out the actual mine, but before we get to that, let's get distracted with some terraforming. I started by removing the temporary crop farms along the edge of the water. They've served their purpose, but I want to build better looking ones later. With those cleared out, I began working on a custom cliff face to connect the upper area where our house sits and the lower area where the mine entrance is. I think a more rocky appearance will make the mine feel much more natural, plus, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I love a good terraforming project. To create the rocks, I used primarily tough blocks with just a bit of cobblestone and acacia logs mixed in for some texture variation. Once the cliff was looking decent, I built a staircase to connect the upper and lower levels. I also created a path to connect everything, which really helped tie the two areas together. You might have noticed a weird hole in the cliff, but don't worry, I specifically left that area open so that we could add a nether portal. I went with the design similar to the mine entrance, but changed it up enough to give it its own unique style. After placing the last of the obsidian and patching up the area behind the portal with tough blocks, I felt like the build was looking pretty good, so I lit the portal using my flint and steel. Why go inside though when we can procrastinate adventuring the scary nether by doing more terraforming? I started by harvesting some cocoa beans I'd planted earlier, and then used them to craft brown concrete powder. With the brown blocks, I added more texture variation to the cliffside. It's a small detail, but I think it really helps take the terrain to the next level. The final touch I wanted to add was some greenery, so I used my shears to gather birch and oak leaves. I also collected tons of flowers. There's such a wide variety since about half the island is technically a flower forest. While I was at it, I used my shears to grab a bunch of shortgrass as well. I then placed all of the vegetation along the cliffside. It added so much life to the area, tying everything together perfectly. In total, all this terraforming took me close to 2 hours, but looking at the before and after, I'd say it was totally worth it. This is probably a dumb idea with only iron armor, but I want to go to the nether to mine quartz for XP. I crafted some gold boots to stay safe from piglins and made my way inside. For once, I actually got a pretty decent spawn. I quickly mined quartz until I hit level 30 and then headed back to the overworld. Back at home, I used the last of my diamonds to craft a new pickaxe and enchanted it. I ended up with Fortune 3, Efficiency 4, and Unbreaking 3, which is honestly so lucky. Using my brand new pickaxe, I started digging out a large hole for our custom mine entrance. Once I was happy with the basic shape, I started digging a staircase deeper underground. The plan is to extend it all the way down to diamond level. Along the way, I ran into a cave and I couldn't resist the urge to explore. After mining some coal and iron, I ventured deeper into the cave and found more diamonds. I continued mining all of the valuable resources that I could get my hands on. And since we have a Fortune 3 pickaxe now, we're getting so many more ore per block. And I was getting seriously lucky with the diamonds. I even found 3 veins side by side. I ended up collecting so many that I took a pit stop to craft a full set of diamond armor. Since we're a lot safer now, I continued exploring the cave. After mining for another 20 minutes or so and collecting a bunch more resources, I ended up running into an abandoned mine shaft, so I took a quick look inside. I found some glowberries and a golden apple before leaving. Honestly, I'm just terrified of the poisonous spiders. They've killed me so many times in the past that I don't even want to risk it. Since my inventory was completely full at this point, I made my way back to the surface. After organizing my items a bit, here's a look at all the goodies we gathered. Since we have so many diamonds, I made a brand new set of tools. I'm also up to level 33, so it's time to enchant 2 things. First, I enchanted my shovel and got efficiency 4. Then I enchanted my axe and also ended up getting efficiency 4. That was a very productive side mission, but now I want to get back to detailing the mine entrance. First, I replaced the ground with coarse dirt and patched up the walls with cobblestone. Once I was happy with the basic shape, I started mixing in other gray blocks to give the whole area a messy, chaotic look. To give it some functionality, I placed a few barrels into the wall. The area was looking a bit too gray, so I added some grass and flowers for a pop of color. For extra detail, I added a few blocks of raw copper, and to enhance the cave vibe, I finished it off with some pointed dripstone. I think the cave is looking pretty good now, so I went back to digging the staircase deeper underground that we had started earlier. I mainly just want an area where I can safely mine a bunch of deep slate and tough blocks. While digging the staircase, I even stumbled upon a few more diamonds. After reaching all the way down to Y-54, I made my way back to the surface to drop off my items at home since my inventory was completely full. Now that I have some space again, I made my way back down, stopping along the way to gather a few stacks of diorite. After that, I went all the way back down to the bottom and mined deep slate and tough blocks until my inventory was completely full. Hopefully that'll tide us over for a while, so I headed back to the surface. The next thing I want to build is a barn for our animals, so let's start by gathering all the materials we'll need. I'm going for that classic red barn look, so the first thing I did was dye all of the sheep red and shear them for their wool. After that, I used some bone meal to create glow lichen. We're also going to need more oak logs, so I got to work chopping down trees. While I was at it, a wandering trader showed up offering some of the new pale garden blocks. I really want to get my hands on these, but I don't have any emeralds, so I went over to a nearby village to see what I could find. Unfortunately, there weren't any emeralds in the chests, so I turned one of the villagers into a Fletcher and traded sticks with him to get some. When I got back home, I was surprised to see a second wandering trader had spawned. I have no idea how rare it is to have 2 traders like this at the same time, but oh well, I'm not complaining. Anyway, the second trader's deals weren't great, so I stuck to my plan and used my emeralds to buy some pale moss and an open eye blossom. I think we can grow more with bone meal, so these will be super fun to use. That was an exciting distraction, but let's get back to collecting all the resources that we need for the barn. First, I chopped down all the bamboo and a bunch of the trees we had planted earlier. Since I plan on using a lot of stripped spruce, I went ahead and stripped it right away to make my life easier later. We also needed more bricks for flower pots, so I headed down to the water and gathered a bunch of clay. While the clay was smelting, I crafted the remaining blocks we'd need, like red concrete powder and various types of tough and deep slate blocks. With all that done, I think we finally have everything ready to build the barn. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to create that classic red barn look, so I used a mix of red terracotta, wool, and concrete powder for the walls. To make the build more dynamic, I added a silo attached to the side of the barn. For the roof, I framed it with a white outline using diorite and birch logs, and then filled in the rest with a variety of deep slate blocks. Outside of the barn, I created 2 large hay bales, which really helped with that farm aesthetic. With the exterior done, I did what I do best and connected the build to our pathway system using coarse dirt. I kept the interior of the barn really simple, so let me just show you the final result. I tried to keep it as open as possible to leave as much space as I could for the animals. As for the silo, it turned out to be the perfect spot to add some extra storage. All that's left to do is bring the animals over from their temporary pens, so I started with the cows and then brought over the sheep next. It's super rewarding seeing the barn full of life now. All this building has left me running low on resources, so I planted a few spruce trees and chopped down some of the oak and birch trees in the nearby forest. The spruce trees grew surprisingly fast, so I chopped them down as soon as they were ready. I then spent a few minutes building some beehives in front of our house. Not only are they practical, but they also add a nice detail to the area. We're back up to level 30, so I took the opportunity to enchant a second axe since mine is going to break soon. I was hoping for Silk Touch, but I only ended up with Unbreaking 3. I think the area behind our house will be perfect for a pumpkin and melon farm, so I began planning out a stone border using cobblestone and tough blocks. To add some color to it, I surrounded the entire thing with a combination of flowers and grass. After that, I extended our path over to the entrance of the farm. I then created rows using spruce slabs and waterlogged them so that the farm will stay hydrated. On top of the slabs, I placed fences to stop the melons from growing where I don't want them to. Finally, I tilled the ground and planted all of my seeds. Once everything grows, it'll bring so much color to the area. I want to create more paths so that we can keep expanding our base, so I headed down to the mine and gathered a bunch of gravel for coarse dirt. I think it would also be fun to use packed mud, so I first used water bottles to convert our regular dirt into mud. I need to combine it with some wheat though, so I went over to the nearby village and straight up stole their entire food supply. While I was in the village, I spotted some cats and I couldn't resist the urge to tame them. I can't get over how cute they are. I went back home and positioned the cats near our back entrance as well as the front entrance in the hopes that they'll scare creepers away. I also put this little kitty in front of our barn. Just look how small it is, it's so cute. I don't have any name tags yet, but once I get some, I'll name these cuties, so be sure to let me know if you have any name ideas. Getting back to build mode, I used the wheat that we got to finally craft our packed mud. After that, I built a path extending further along the top of the hill. I then used the packed mud we made to add more texture variation into the path. I also mixed in just a tiny bit of granite, which I think fits the block palette nicely. While I was at it, I also textured the paths at the bottom of the hill. I want to continue adding more color and life to our base, so I got to work planning a potato farm. After getting all of the water sources in, I covered them up with dark oak slabs, and on top of those, I placed a polished deep slate wall and lantern. With those in place, all that was left to do was till all of the grass blocks and then plant our potatoes. I didn't have enough to get the whole thing filled in, but we can keep expanding as they grow. I like this design so much that I got to work building a similar one at the bottom of the hill. Only this one will be a wheat field. I got interrupted by a pillager, which was a bit annoying, but I got the farm all put together in no time. These farms are adding so much character to the area and really helping with that cozy vibe, so I can't help but add one more. This one is going to be a bit different though, since it's for sugarcane. I made a border using path blocks and then created alternating rows of waterlogged spruce slabs and sugarcane. It's a simple design, but I think it helped fill out the space quite nicely. My shovel was about to break, so before it does, I went to the nether and mined quartz until I was back up to level 30. I then crafted a new diamond shovel and enchanted it, getting efficiency 4 and unbreaking 3. I also crafted an anvil and combined my two axes to make a better one. Using my brand new tools, I got to work chopping down the spruce trees outside of the house, and then I terraformed the area a bit more just to get it looking a bit better. As I was tidying up the area, I finally got around to chopping down the old animal pens since we no longer need them. Considering this is hardcore, I want to keep enchanting my gear, so I made a trip to the nether once again to mine quartz until I was level 30. While I was mining, I spotted a fortress which I would love to explore. Before I take it on, I went back to the overworld and enchanted my sword. I ended up getting sharpness 4 and looting 3, which is awesome. I'm feeling more confident with a better sword now, so I went back to the fortress. After exploring for a while, I found a blaze spawner, so I took a few minutes to get blaze rods. Since I have looting 3 on my sword, I got a bunch in no time. I continued looking around and collected all of the loot that I could find. Along the way, I saw some magma cubes, so I killed them for their cream. We can make fire resistance potions with these, which will make future nether trips a lot less risky. In order to brew potions though, I'll need some nether wart, so I continued exploring until I eventually found some. This has been a super productive adventure, but before I do something dumb and die, I decided to head back home. Most of our crops had grown at this point, so I harvested them all with my fortune pickaxe and then replanted both fields. I was able to get both of them filled in, which is awesome. What's not so awesome is the fact that I only have 2 furnaces inside of the house, which is honestly starting to annoy me a bit. To solve this problem, let's build a blacksmith where we can hide both an auto smelter and lava farm. Without wasting any time, I got to work crafting and gathering all of the materials we are going to need. It took a while, but we should have all the materials that we need now. I got to work building, beginning with a foundation made of tough blocks. For the second floor, I used stripped spruce beams for that Tudor-style look, then filled in the rest of the walls with a mix of oak, birch, and bamboo. To make it look like an actual blacksmith, I attached a forge to the side of the house. I then replaced the grass blocks near the forge with stone and cobblestone to give it more of a medieval look. To bring the build to life, I added a magma block to resemble hot coals in the forge. Next, I placed a smithing table, an anvil, and an armor stand, which all fit the blacksmith theme perfectly. Since the covered area on the side of our starter house was still empty, I added a few extra details there as well. The other side of the blacksmith was still looking a little bland, so I added oak leaves for a nice pop of color. I did the same thing at the back, but for this one, I placed flower pots on top, so this way we could add even more color. With all the flower pots filled in and the final touches in place, the exterior is officially finished. Moving straight inside, I got started on the interior by fixing up the walls and getting the ceiling in place. I heard a wandering trader outside while building, and after checking out his trades, I saw he was offering a mangrove propagule. I'd love to get my hands on one of these, so I ran over to the nearby village and traded sticks with the Fletcher again. Using the emeralds, I traded for the propagule and then planted it behind the barn. Somehow, I always seem to be getting distracted, but anyways, let's get back to working on the interior of the blacksmith by building the floor. I decided to use red terracotta and concrete powder to help bring some color into the room. I think we should be able to hide a super smelter in the basement, so I planned out a staircase using dark oak stairs. To fill up the wall above the staircase, I used a few paintings. After adding a few more details, here's a look at the fully decorated first floor. Moving up to the second floor, I patched up the ceiling and then added a railing using oak trapdoors. This would be the perfect spot for a lava farm, so I crafted up some cauldrons as well as buckets. I then ran over to the lava pool where we had mined obsidian earlier and collected a bunch of lava for the farm. Heading back to the blacksmith, let's begin building the farm by placing a row of cauldrons. Next, we need to place a row of full blocks above that, so I used rock copper just to flex on the haters. Underneath the blocks, let's add our pointed dripstone. At the very top, I placed some temporary dirt blocks and then surrounded them with trapdoors. After removing the dirt, all we need to do is add in the lava. Full transparency, I have fire tick turned off in this world. If I didn't, this would 100% burn down the entire house. Anyways, you can see the farm is working since lava is dripping down into the cauldrons. Eventually they'll fill up, and then we can use the lava for fuel in our furnaces. As I mentioned earlier, I want to put a super smelter in the basement, so I took a minute to make a new pickaxe and enchant it since this is going to require a lot of digging. I ended up getting efficiency 4 and unbreaking 3, so I combined my 2 pickaxes to create one with efficiency 5 on it. Heading to the basement, I began digging a huge hole where we can build our super smelter. Hopefully this will be big enough. Now that we have a spot to build in, I began crafting all of the necessary items. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough iron for all of the hoppers, so I made a quick trip down into the mines. There's a huge cave system down here that I've barely come even close to fully exploring, so there's still tons of iron all over the place. While looking around, a spider knocked me off a ledge, which nearly gave me a heart attack. I really need to get feather falling on my boots because that was a close one. Anyways, after mining a few stacks of iron, I made my way back home and started smelting it up. While waiting, I went over and cut down some mangrove trees. Once the iron was ready, I crafted the rest of the hoppers. And with that, we should have everything that we need now. Finally, I got to work building the super smelter. I've never built one quite like this before, so I followed a tutorial that I found by Mysticat. To make sure it works, I loaded up the rest of our raw iron, and as you can see, everything flows directly into the output chest super fast. This is going to make smelting so much more convenient. I want to decorate the room since it looks absolutely terrible right now, but I heard a wandering trader outside and he was offering pale oak saplings. I've never used pale oak before, so we have to get these. I ran over to the village once again and got some emeralds from the Fletcher. I then traded for a couple saplings and couldn't even wait for it to grow naturally, so I tried using bone meal. That's when I realized I'm stupid, since we actually need 4 saplings, similar to growing a dark oak tree. Before the wandering trader despawns, I quickly ran back to the village once again. This time I traded wheat with one of the farmers. After getting a couple more saplings, I finally grew my first pale oak tree. I cut the tree down and then used my fortune pickaxe to try and get as many saplings back as I could, but of course, the entire tree only gave me back a single sapling. Oh well, at least we have more of an excuse now to eventually find and explore a pale garden. I spent half an hour or so making the super smelter room look a bit more presentable. I even used the limited pale oak we got for the floor. I chose to keep all of the redstone completely exposed, so if something breaks, we can easily fix it. I went to check in on the lava farm upstairs, and all of the cauldrons were full. After collecting the lava with some buckets, I loaded it into the furnaces and started smelting all of my copper. I've got a build idea that's going to need a decent amount of it. While it smelts, I planted tons of oak and birch trees all around our base. I've been chopping down a lot and not really replanting, so I just want to bring back that lush vibe to the area. By the time I was done, the copper was ready, so I crafted some trapdoors and waxed them so that they won't age down. Since there's an open area in front of the house, I want to fill it up with a nether wart farm. I started with the soul sand and then placed the nether wart on top. Then to create a planter box of sorts, I surrounded the soul sand with the trapdoors that we just made. I want to do a base tour at the end of the video, so I spent some time using bone meal to add plenty of grass and flowers. This should help tie everything together and make the area look much more presentable. There's just one more thing I want to build though, and that's a dock. I challenged myself by trying to build it on a diagonal, which was a bit tricky, but I think it helped make it look a lot more interesting. For a final touch, I added some lanterns as well as a couple boats. Now that the dock is finished, let's slow things down for a minute and take a look at everything that we've built so far in our brand new hardcore world. Some of you have been asking me to use shaders, so I thought for the tour I could put those on so we can see everything in its full glory. Beginning the tour at the bottom of the hill, we have a big crop farm here, and then on either side of the staircase we have our nether portal as well as our mine entrance. Let's head up the stairs as this is where most of our builds are. We can first check out our little bee farm here. I usually hide my bee farms in some sort of structure, but I thought it'd be fun to just have them kind of roam around freely, which also adds a lot of life and atmosphere to the area, just seeing them kind of fly around. Let's check out the barn next. Of course, our little kitty is guarding the entrance for us, thank you very much. But let's head inside and check in on our animals. We of course have our cows as well as our sheep. I really like the red kind of barn style that we went for. It's just that classic red barn look, you know, can't go wrong with that. If we head back outside and take a left, we have our pumpkin and melon farm. This one is super satisfying with like the perfect rows. I know it's not the most efficient to have it set up like this, but I like how it looks, so yeah, really happy with this one as well. Heading further along the path, we of course have our starter house. Let's go take a look inside here. Again, thank you for guarding the door, thank you very much. I had some different blocks to use, you know, like the bamboo as well as just jungle for the floor. So I tried using some different blocks that I don't normally always use, so I had a lot of fun experimenting with those. While we're in here, I also want to update the map. You can see this is what it was looking like when we first made it. Pretty much just had our starter house there. So let's take this one down and you can see, oh yeah, that's what I like to see. Just so much more stuff on here. It's looking awesome. Let's take this one down as well. Only these two should really have changes on them. But while I'm here, I also wanted to convert these item frames into glowing item frames, which should just make it look quite a bit better. You can see that's why I have the glow ink in my inventory. You know, I'm a 200 IQ planner. So this one is going to go back here. This one will go here. Let's grab our other two maps. This one will go right there and boop. It looks so much better with the glowing item frames. You don't get those weird lines in between the different maps. But as you can see, we've only filled up this small section of the island, and I'm so excited to keep expanding and eventually fill out the rest of the entire space. While we're in here, we might as well check out our storage room. Typically, I just do kind of boring rows of chests, but here, you know, I had some pillars dividing things up and also using a combination of barrels and chests. and labeling things with signs and stuff like that just made it a bit more unique and interesting to look at. That's about it for the house, so let's head out the back entrance here to check out our sugarcane farm. I haven't really harvested this since we first planted it, but we have a lot of sugarcane. Whenever we need it, we can just quickly come back here and gather it all up, so I'm really glad we put that together. If we wrap in between the two houses, we have a really good view of the forge on our blacksmith. I really like this kind of tucked away area in between the two buildings. It's just sort of cozy and has a nice vibe to it. But let's go check inside of the actual blacksmith since we have a couple of farms in here. If we head upstairs, this is of course where we have our lava farm. You can see it's almost all filled in again. This was a super quick farm to set up, but it's honestly going to save us so much coal, which is, you know, kind of a pain to gather sometimes. Let's head to the basement and check out the super smelter. I feel like I always procrastinate putting these together in my Minecraft worlds, so I was like, you know what, I'm just doing it episode 1, getting it out of the way. And this is going to be super handy for just, you know, obviously smelting up large quantities of items. And it was also fun using the pale oak for the floor. Heading back outside, we just have a couple more things to check out, and that's our other crop farm over here, as well as our nether wart farm. I'm always super scared going into the nether to gather this stuff up, but now that we have it, it's going to be super helpful for brewing potions and making future adventures a lot safer. I think that's pretty much everything that we've built so far, but I'm seriously just so excited to keep expanding this island and filling it up with builds, so be sure to let me know what you think I should add. I really hope you enjoyed the first episode of my Let's Play. If you want to explore the world for yourself, consider supporting me by getting the world download on my Patreon. As always, thank you so much for watching and happy building.